If in the Philippines women are strong, independent women, it's different in other countries, especially in the Middle East, because women there don't have the right to work. Let's take the story of this woman as an example. She wasn't holding a weapon, she wasn't shouting in protest, she was just a simple woman who wore a headscarf and the police didn't like it. And because of this, Mahsa Amini was arrested by Iran's morality police and she never made it out alive. Her death became the reason why protests erupted, not just against the hijab laws, but also against the entire country. Because for a long time, millions of women in different parts of the Islamic world have experienced cruelty. What happened to Mahsa is not a rare case. It happens repeatedly. From Tehran to Kabul to Riyadh, many women are silenced, restricted, and gradually erased, not by foreigners, but by the very system that is supposed to protect them. And this is not just a matter of human rights, it is also about the collapse of society. And when a country or a leader oppresses half of its own population, it's not just potential that's lost, the future is lost as well. In this video, we will talk about why the abuse of women has become one of the most destructive problems within the Islamic world itself. And you will also learn here why this will be the reason, why countries will fall. This is not just the story of one woman in one country, but it has become a major problem happening in different places around the world. But before we continue, please like this video. It really means a lot to us content creators. Thank you very much. Right now, hundreds of millions of women are living under systems that control their every move. What they wear, where they go, who they marry, whether they can work, whether they can study, whether they can leave the house without a man's permission. In Iran, the morality police patrol the streets to catch women who, according to them, are not dressed properly. They take the women, put them in vans, and bring them to detention centers. Many are beaten, and sometimes, like what happened to Mahsa Amini, some die and then the authorities lie about how it happened. In Afghanistan, armed Taliban stand in front of schools, preventing girls who just want to study beyond 6th grade. For them, educating women is a crime. Many of these men are barely literate themselves. They claim that women's minds are supposedly dangerous if educated. In some parts of Pakistan, Yemen, and even in countries considered moderate like Jordan, there are fathers and brothers who kill their own daughters and sisters. And what do they call this? Honor. In court, punishments are often light, and sometimes there is none at all. The number of cases is shocking. The violence doesn't stop. And the reason is almost always the same. They say they're protecting culture, religion, and tradition. But here's the truth they don't want to accept. They're not protecting anything. They're slowly destroying everything. When you silence half of your population, it's not just voices that are lost. You lose doctors who are trained to heal the sick. You lose engineers who are skilled at building structures and roads. You lose teachers who are used to educating the next generation. You lose entrepreneurs who are skilled at creating jobs. You lose mothers who are used to raising children who know how to respect women. In other words, you lose the future. And there is a price to pay for that loss. We are now paying for it through poverty, chaos, and the gradual collapse of society. Let's look at money, because nothing shows more clearly how severe the systematic abuse of women is than its effect on the economy. The Middle East and North Africa have the lowest number of employed women in the world. In 2022, according to the World Bank, only 19% of women of working age had jobs or were even looking for work. Looking at the whole world, the average percentage of employed women is around 48%. This means it's double compared to what the Middle East achieves. And in some countries, the gap is even worse at 68%. In Misr, it's only 15%. In Iraq, it drops even further to 11%. And in Jordan, even though the female literacy rate is almost 100%, the female labor participation rate is still stuck at just 15%. Think about what these numbers mean. Imagine a street in Cairo or Baghdad. For every 5 women you see, 4 of them are not part of the formal economy. Not because they lack ability, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack capability, but because there are laws, customs, and those in power who have decided that women should remain unseen and without value when it comes to money. What is the result of this? Entire countries that seem to be only half functioning, economies strangled by ideology. And the problem becomes even more apparent when you look at unemployment. For Arab women who are really trying to enter the workforce, the unemployment rate reaches 42.5%. That's 3 times higher than the global average for women. But nothing is worse than what happened in Afghanistan. When the Taliban took power in August 2021, they didn't just change the government. They launched a direct war against the livelihood of women. Women were banned from most jobs, businesses were shut down, and half of the population was told as if they no longer had the right to appear in public. According to the United Nations Development Program, banning women from working deprives Afghanistan of $1 billion every year. That is 5% of the country's entire gross domestic product. It disappears every year. It is being sacrificed for extremism while millions of Afghans are starving. But the situation is getting even worse. According to United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, preventing Afghan girls from attending secondary school costs the country an additional 2.5% of its annual gross domestic product. If these 3 million girls were allowed to finish their studies and eventually work, they could have contributed at least $5.4 billion to Afghanistan's economy. But instead, they remain at home year after year, watching their future slowly slip away, hoping for a freedom that may never come. And remember, Afghanistan was already one of the poorest countries in the world even before all of this. Now, 2/3 of the population need emergency humanitarian assistance just to survive. Almost 97% of Afghans are at risk of falling below the poverty line. Some desperate families are even selling their children. And what is the Taliban's response to this tragedy? More bans, more closed doors, even tighter restrictions. But this is the most infuriating part of all. We have clear, undeniable evidence that the opposite approach actually works. Look at Bangladesh, a Muslim-majority country that chose a different direction. They invested heavily in girls' education. They opened up job opportunities, and the results are clear. Female labor participation increased from 10% in 2003 to over 36% by 2016. The economy boomed with 6 to 7% growth each year. The poverty rate dropped. Bangladesh became one of the greatest success stories in the developing world. Now compare that to Pakistan. Almost the same population, almost the same resources. But women were kept on the sidelines. Female workforce participation remained at around 22%, and the economy was weak, unstable, directionless. Despite this, even Saudi Arabia, yes, Saudi Arabia, the country where women were once not allowed to drive and where women needed a man's permission for almost everything, has already learned this. Under the Vision 2030 program, the government strongly pushed for women to enter the workforce. Change happened quickly. Female labor participation rose from around 20% to over 36% by late 2024. Now, Saudi women work as engineers, financiers, police officers, and entrepreneurs. And the government is clear. Empowering women is not just about rights. This is necessary for the economy to survive and not just rely on oil. So the evidence is very clear. This is no longer a matter of opinion. The math is simple. Countries that include women are rising. Countries that push them out are gradually falling behind. And yet in Afghanistan, in Iran, and in many other places, oppression continues. Restrictions are increasing. Violence is getting worse. And this is where a frightening question comes in. If the damage to the economy is this severe now, what is it doing to the next generation? What will happen to societies that not only oppress women today, but also destroy any chance of progress for tomorrow? The answer to this should keep you up at night. Afghanistan has done something that should frighten the whole world. It is now the only country on earth, the only one out of 195 nations, that officially bans girls from attending secondary education. Not neglected, not lacking in funds. It was banned, illegal, a crime. By 2024, there are 1.4 million Afghan girls who should have been in middle school or high school, but instead, they are confined inside their homes. Their books were taken away. Schools were closed and locked. Teachers were threatened to stay silent or flee the country. And their minds, intelligent, curious, hungry for knowledge, are being deliberately and mercilessly wasted over and over again. The effect of this spreads throughout society like dominoes slowly falling. Child marriage has exploded. Before the Taliban took power, studies showed that about 28% of girls were married before the age of 18. That was already serious back then. But by 2023, local research groups found that 70% of the young women they surveyed personally knew someone who was forced to marry before becoming an adult. 70%. Because their children can no longer go to school, some families just sell them to the highest bidder. At the same time, the healthcare system also collapsed because women were banned from universities. Afghanistan is quickly running out of female doctors, nurses, and midwives. And when these women are gone, who will treat the women and children? This is the real question that these regimes refuse to answer. In a society that is very conservative, where male doctors often cannot examine female patients because of religious restrictions, the situation becomes impossible and dangerous. There are women with serious illnesses. They could have been treated, but they die because no one is allowed to treat them. The maternal mortality rate is rising. There are babies who die during childbirth, which could have been normal if there was proper medical help. And in December 2024, the Taliban issued an order banning women from studying medicine or becoming midwives. This closed one of the last doors that could have remained open. They're not just denying women education, they are deliberately creating a disaster that will affect many generations, for many decades, maybe even centuries to come. And even though Afghanistan is the most extreme example, it is not alone. In Iran, for more than 4 decades, the theocratic regime has been gradually restricting what women can study. Where can they work? How should they dress? And whether they have a place in public spaces? There are universities that prohibit women from taking many academic majors. There is a strict dress code on campuses, and the punishment is suspension or expulsion. Over time, state surveillance has become more advanced. There are facial recognition cameras. There are AI-powered monitoring apps. There are informant networks that turn neighbors against each other. But perhaps there is no single event that more clearly shows how insane the obsession to control women is than ours. What happened in Mecca in March 2002? A fire broke out at a girls' school. The fire spread quickly. The students, teenage girls who were terrified, tried to escape to save their own lives. But the religious police blocked the exits. Why? Because the girls were not wearing the mandatory black abaya and headscarf. They said the girls were not dressed properly. In the twisted logic of the Mutawa, the religious enforcers of Saudi Arabia, it was better for the girls to burn alive than to be seen in public not dressed properly. 14 young girls died that day. 14 children. Not because of an accident, not because of lack of time, but because of policy. They were killed not by fire, but by fanaticism. Their lives were sacrificed because covering their hair was considered more important than life itself. That single incident should have sparked outrage around the world. It should have led to widespread change. It should have been a turning point. But instead, it became just a small footnote that most people forgot. And the cruelty did not stop. In fact, it spread even more, because taking away education and job opportunities is just part of the nightmare. The physical violence that women experience is even worse. The violence is legal, accepted by the state, and allowed by the system. This is something that many people in the West can hardly understand. Every year in Iran, approximately 375 to 450 women are killed by their own families in what are called honor killings. That means more than one woman per day is strangled, stabbed, shot, beaten, burned, thrown from a building. These acts are committed by fathers, brothers, husbands, uncles, and cousins because they decided that some kind of shame was brought upon them. What is this so-called shame? The list is very long and completely senseless. Refusing an arranged marriage, asking for a divorce. She was seen in public with a man who wasn't her blood relative, and because of that, she was considered deserving of death. Even simple things can already be considered a sin. Owning a mobile phone, expressing your own opinion is forbidden. That's also forbidden. And yes, even being a victim of rape or sexual assault. In many places, the victim herself is considered at fault. Sometimes a woman hasn't even done anything at all. Just a rumor, a suspicion, just a feeling that she crossed the line. And those who committed the crime just walk free. In Iran, there are still clear provisions in the law that allow for honor killings. If the killer is the victim's father or paternal grandfather, the punishment is often just a few years in prison, not a full murder case. In other words, the state has made it legal to kill a woman with the family's blessing. It's as if the law is telling every man, your female relatives are your property, and if they don't please you, you have the right to get rid of them. Since the protests over Mahsa Amini began in 2022, the number of femicides in Iran has increased by 60%. 85% of the victims were killed by their own husbands. And while this is happening, the Islamic Republic claims they are protecting women. But their own laws create a system with almost no punishment for the unjust treatment of women. Pakistan's record isn't clean either. The well-known Hudud ordinances implemented in 1980 under the military leader Zia-ul-Haq had a strict policy. When a woman reports that she has experienced an unjust situation, she has to present 4 adult male Muslim eyewitnesses to prove it. 4 witnesses to her own experience. If she fails to do that, which is almost impossible, she can even be charged with making a false accusation. The victim suffers, while the wrongdoer goes free. In Yemen and some parts of the Arabian Peninsula, there is still no clear minimum. There are girls as young as 8 or 9 years old being married off to men who are 3, 4, or even 5 times older than them. Their bodies are not yet ready for the responsibilities of having a family. Their minds are not yet ready to consent to anything, but no one asks what they want. Their opinion doesn't matter. Their consent doesn't matter. To the system, they are just a transaction, not a person. And in a vast part of the Islamic world, it is the very laws themselves that place women as inferior. In court, a woman's testimony is worth only half that of a man's. Her inheritance is also only half. To travel, work, get married, get divorced, or make decisions about her own body, she needs a man's permission. She is not a full citizen. She is just a living property. So this is the question that everyone who defends this system must answer. What happens to a society where its own mothers are afraid, where its own daughters are forced and restrained, and where their own sisters are restrained? What happens when half of the population lives in fear every day? The answer is harsh but clear. That society gradually becomes weak. This is not speculation. This is not the opinion of the United States. It is documented, studied, and proven. According to studies by the International Committee of the Red Cross, the United Nations, and many academic institutions, there is a direct connection between gender inequality and a country's instability. The pattern repeats itself. The greater the inequality, the higher the chances of internal conflict, political violence, and the eventual collapse of the state. This pattern works across different continents, different cultures, and different periods in history. Societies that repeatedly oppress women become more dictatorial, more corrupt, more violent, and more fragile. They have a harder time solving problems peacefully. They are more likely to end up in civil war. They are closer to collapse. Now look at the countries with the worst records when it comes to women's rights: Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, Syria, Sudan. Now also look at the countries most devastated by war, hunger, extremism, and government failure. It's the same list. This is not an accident. This is a result. When a society is built on the oppression of half its people, it's like building a house on sand. Little by little, you're creating a pressure cooker of anger, sadness, and hopelessness that will one day explode. And when violence becomes normal within the family, it spreads out into the community, into politics, and throughout society. Iran proved this in a very powerful way starting in September 2022, when Mahsa Amini died in a detention center in Tehran. She was killed by men whose job was supposedly to enforce morality. The explosion came faster and stronger than anyone expected. Within just a few hours, protests erupted in Tehran. Within a few days, they spread to many cities. There were young girls who stood on top of vehicles and burned their headscarves while people cheered. Students marched inside the universities. They shouted, "Woman, life, freedom." Workers went on strike. Shopkeepers closed their stores in solidarity. For many months, the Islamic Republic faced the biggest challenge to its power since the 1979 revolution that created the regime. The protests reached every province, every level of society, every ethnic group. This was not a small movement. It was a nationwide uprising against everything the regime stands for, and the regime's response showed what it truly is. According to the United Nations fact-finding mission on Iran, security forces killed at least 551 protesters in the following months. This included 49 women and 68 children. They used assault rifles, shotguns, and live ammunition against unarmed civilians. They arrested more than 1,200 people. The detainees were systematically tortured in ways too brutal to describe in detail. Prisoners, both men and women, were raped as a means of intimidation and punishment. They executed young boys in public, hanging them from cranes as a warning to anyone who might think of resisting. And even with all this, the spirit of resistance remains alive. Women in Iran continue to walk in public without head coverings, challenging the morality police to stop them. There are secret networks exchanging videos of resistance. International pressure is gradually increasing, even if it's slow and imperfect. The regime has deployed facial recognition technology, AI surveillance systems, and a mobile app called NASER, which means overseer, encouraging citizens to report women who violate the dress code. But for every woman they arrest, even more refuse to comply. The Islamic Republic has spent 45 years building a complex system of oppression against women. Now, that very system is slowly destroying Iran from within. Trust is gone, fear is weakening, and the next explosion is no longer a question of if it will happen, but when. But there is one thing that the hardliners, the enforcers, the morality police, and the Taliban fighters did not see. The women they tried to silence, the minds they tried to destroy, the spirits they wanted to crush. They are fighting back and they are winning. In Afghanistan, despite the Taliban's total ban on women's education, secret schools have spread across the country like wildfire. Brave women who are willing to be imprisoned, tortured, or killed just to secretly teach young girls. In basements, behind rooms, behind closed doors. There are guards outside. They know what will happen if they get caught, but they still do it. Because they know something the Taliban will never understand. You can't kill an idea by burning a book. In Iran, the new generation of women simply keeps going. They refuse to obey. They post videos of themselves walking in malls without a hijab. They dance in public plazas. They organize, connect, and help each other through encrypted apps that the regime can't control. With every arrest, there's a new martyr. With every crackdown, someone new joins the fight. And real reform is actually possible even in places that once seemed hopeless. In Morocco, the family was completely transformed. Back in 2004, women were made full citizens. They gained the right to request a divorce, to care for their children, and to inherit equally. In Saudi Arabia, changes have taken place that, if you think about it, seemed impossible just 15 years ago. Now, women there drive on open highways, attend concerts and sporting events, lead big businesses, travel abroad without a man's permission, and walk in public without a guardian. Back there, the changes are not yet finished. They're not fast enough, and in many places they haven't even started. But there is clear proof that progress is possible, that Islam and women's rights are not enemies. Millions of Muslims around the world prove this every day in the way they live, in how they raise their children, and in how they treat every half of humanity as equal people. The question is not whether reform is possible. The question is whether these regimes will change before they completely collapse, along with millions of innocent lives. Because this is clear, collapse will come to those who refuse to change. No country in history has become great while crushing half of its people. No empire has lasted by waging war against its own mothers. No civilization has prospered by teaching its sons that its daughters are worthless. The fall of a nation does not always come through foreign invasion, economic crisis, or natural disaster. Sometimes decay begins from within. Sometimes the poison comes from our own leaders, from our own laws, from twisted interpretations of faith and tradition. Sometimes the downfall is slow, generation after generation, as potential is wasted. Talent is destroyed, and the brightest minds escape to places where they are allowed to think. And that's exactly what's happening now in much of the Islamic world. Mahsa Amini did not choose to become a symbol. She was just a 22-year-old Kurdish woman visiting relatives in Tehran. She just wanted to live a normal life. But the morality police said her headscarf was a little loose. 3 days after that, she was dead. And her name is Your Cry of Millions. Her death exposed what many have long known, but the world refused to see. The very system that claims to protect them, the Islamic society, is the one destroying them. The abuse of women is not a minor issue, not a strange culture, and not someone else's problem. It is the crack in the heart of a civilization, and every day it grows bigger. So this is the question that everyone needs to answer. Every government, every religious leader, every family, every individual. Will the Islamic world choose unity or its own extinction? Will it embrace women, unleash their potential, and build a future worth living? Or will it continue to bury itself, silencing one voice at a time until there is nothing left to save? The clock is ticking, the pressure is rising, and when the history of this era is written, only one thing will matter: who prevailed.